Episode 7, The Night Before. Wednesday night settled over the Bronx like a held breath, the kind of stillness that comes before storms or violence or irrevocable decisions. Miguel Rodriguez walked alone for the first time in weeks, Carlos's absence beside him feeling stranger than his constant presence had become. The enforcer had dropped him at his building's entrance with a cigarette and a nod, some unspoken understanding passing between them that tomorrow night would change everything. That tonight Miguel deserved a few hours of whatever passed for freedom in his new life. The apartment was dark when Miguel climbed the stairs, his mother and siblings long asleep. He moved through the kitchen without turning on lights, muscle memory guiding him around the table, past the refrigerator with its humming protest, to his shared bedroom where his younger brothers breathed in synchronized rhythm. He stood in the doorway watching them, thinking about how much they looked like their father in the dim light filtering through the window. The man who disappeared when Miguel was 12, leaving nothing but child support checks that came sporadically, and a hole in their lives that Miguel had tried to fill ever since. Tomorrow night, he would carry heroin through the streets of Hunts Point. Tomorrow night, he would become exactly what Diego Santos needed him to be. Not muscle like Carlos, not a soldier who could be replaced, but something more valuable. A smart kid from a good family who could move through the world without suspicion, who could count and think and be trusted with the operation's secrets because Diego owned him completely now. Owned him through love and fear and the systematic destruction of every other option. Miguel changed into dark clothes without waking his brothers. Jeans, a black t-shirt, sneakers that wouldn't make noise on metal. He moved back through the apartment like a ghost, pausing at his mother's door to listen to her breathing, steady and deep, with the exhaustion of another double shift at the garment factory. She'd left food wrapped in foil on the stove, arroz con gandules and pernil, and the sight of it made his chest tight with a guilt that had no name, no clear shape, only the weight of knowing he was about to betray everything she'd sacrificed to keep him safe. The fire escape outside his window was still warm from the day's heat, the metal holding the sun's memory even in darkness. Miguel climbed down carefully, years of practice making him silent, invisible to the neighbors who might look out and wonder why a good kid was sneaking out at midnight on a Wednesday. The alley behind his building smelled like garbage and piss and the particular sweetness of rot that defines summer in the Bronx, but Miguel barely noticed. His mind was already 3 blocks east, on the 3rd floor of a building he'd memorized the way other kids memorized baseball statistics. Carmen's building was newer than his, built in the 50s instead of the 30s, with fire escapes that didn't sway under your weight and windows that actually closed all the way. Miguel had climbed to her window a dozen times since Diego's arrangement had transformed their innocent romance into something darker, more desperate. Each visit carried the thrill of transgression, not just sneaking past her sleeping parents, but defying Diego's implicit ownership of both their lives. Stealing these moments of genuine connection in a relationship built on manipulation. The streets were quiet, but not empty. Miguel moved through shadows, avoiding streetlights, and the corners where Diego's lookout stood smoking and watching. He knew their positions now, had learned the geography of his prison with the attention of someone planning an escape he'd never attempt. Mrs. Gonzalez's bodega on the corner, closed but with lights still on in the apartment above. The vacant lot on 164th, where kids played stickball and men settled disputes with fists and sometimes knives. The route required 3 blocks north, 2 blocks east, then the alley behind Carmen's building where the fire escape descended low enough to reach from a dumpster. Miguel hauled himself up, hands finding holds worn smooth by weather and time. 3rd floor, Carmen's window. The curtains were drawn, but light showed around the edges. She was awake, waiting, the way she'd been waiting since he'd slipped her a note that afternoon at the social club when Diego was in the back room and Carlos was watching the door. Tonight, midnight, I need to see you. He tapped the glass softly, 3 times, their signal. The curtain moved, and Carmen's face appeared, beautiful and worried, and so heartbreakingly young that Miguel felt the full weight of what Diego had stolen from both of them. She opened the window without speaking, stepping back to let him climb through into the small bedroom that smelled like her perfume and the vanilla candles she burned to mask the cigarette smoke that drifted from other apartments. "You shouldn't be here," Carmen whispered, but she was already in his arms, her body fitting against his, the way it had since their first kiss behind the school bleachers 6 months ago. Back when they were just kids falling in love instead of pawns in Diego's game. If he finds out, he won't. Miguel kissed her forehead, her temple, the curve of her neck where her pulse beat fast against his lips. "Carlos let me walk home alone. I think they're giving me tonight, before tomorrow." Carmen pulled back to look at him, her dark eyes searching his face in the candlelight. She was wearing a thin nightgown, white cotton that made her look even younger than 17. And Miguel felt a surge of protective rage toward her brother that had nowhere to go, no outlet except the tightening of his arms around her waist. "Ray told me about the warehouse," she said quietly, "about what you have to do tomorrow night. Miguel, you can't. I don't want to talk about tomorrow." His voice came out rougher than he intended, scraped raw by fear and resignation and the desperate need to have this one thing, this one night before everything changed. "Please, Carmen, I need tonight to be about us. Just us. Not Diego, not the delivery, not what happens after. Can we have that? Can we pretend just for a few hours that we're just two kids in love?" Carmen finished, and the sadness in her smile broke something in Miguel's chest. "We were never just that, were we? Diego made sure of it." "We were," Miguel insisted, cupping her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "At the beginning, before you knew, those first weeks were real. What I feel for you is real. That's the only thing Diego doesn't own." Carmen's eyes filled with tears that she blinked back fiercely. "I love you," she whispered. "I know I shouldn't. I know it's what he wanted, but I do. I love you, and tomorrow you're going to." Miguel kissed her before she could finish, before the future could intrude any further into this stolen present. Her lips were soft and salt-tinged from almost tears, and she made a small sound in her throat that was half sob, half surrender, as she kissed him back with the intensity of someone trying to memorize a moment before it disappeared forever. They moved to her bed without breaking apart, Miguel kicking off his sneakers while Carmen's fingers found the hem of his shirt and pulled it over his head. The room was small enough that 3 steps took them from window to mattress, and the bed creaked softly under their combined weight, a sound that made them both freeze and listen for movement in the apartment beyond Carmen's closed door. Silence. Her parents slept on, unaware that their daughter's bedroom held a boy they'd forbidden her to see, a boy her brother had claimed as his own property. The danger of discovery should have cooled Miguel's desire, but instead it sharpened everything. The feel of Carmen's skin under his hands, the way she arched into his touch, the desperate hunger in the way she pulled him closer. "I want to remember this," Carmen breathed against his mouth as Miguel's hands found the curve of her waist, slid up to cup her breast through the thin cotton of her nightgown. Her nipple hardened under his palm, and she gasped. The sound muffled against his shoulder. "I want to remember what it feels like when it's just us, when it's real." Miguel pulled back just enough to look at her. This girl who'd become his whole world, even as that world crumbled around them. Her hair spread dark across the white pillow, her chest rising and falling with quick breaths, her eyes locked on his with an intensity that made him feel seen in a way Diego's surveillance never could. This was being known, being chosen, being loved for who he was rather than what he could provide. "It's always been real," he told her, and meant it with a ferocity that surprised him. "Everything else is Diego's lie, but this, us, this is the only true thing I have left." He kissed her again, slower this time, tasting her fully, while his hands learned the geography of her body with the reverence of a pilgrim at a shrine. Her nightgown whispered against the sheets as he lifted it, exposing the smooth brown skin of her stomach, her ribs, the small breasts he'd touched before, but never seen. She was beautiful in the candlelight, all soft curves and vulnerability. And when she reached for the button of his jeans, he helped her, both of them fumbling with urgency and inexperience, and the need to feel something good before tomorrow's darkness swallowed them whole. They'd been intimate before. Heavy petting in stairwells and rooftops, hands exploring under clothes in the desperate way of teenagers with no privacy and too much desire. But this was different. This was Carmen, pulling him down on top of her, skin against skin, her legs parting to make room for him as he settled between her thighs. This was Miguel kissing her breast, his tongue circling her nipple until she moaned softly and buried her fingers in his hair. This was both of them understanding that tonight might be all they had, that tomorrow he might not come back from Hunt's Point, that Diego's game was reaching its end game, and they were running out of time to claim anything for themselves. "I love you," Miguel whispered against her skin, his hand sliding down her stomach to the heat between her legs. She was already wet when he touched her, and the realization that she wanted him this much made his own desire almost painful. "Carmen, I love you so much. Show me," she breathed, her hips rising to meet his hand. "Miguel, please, I need to feel something that isn't fear. I need to feel you." He kissed his way back up her body, from her breast to her collarbone to the pulse point at her throat, where he could feel her heart hammering. His hand stayed between her legs, fingers exploring gently, learning what made her gasp and arch and grip his shoulders hard enough to leave marks. She was trembling under him, her breath coming in short pants, and when he finally positioned himself at her entrance, she looked up at him with eyes that held trust and terror and love all tangled together. "Are you sure?" he asked, even though his body was screaming for him to move, to claim this one thing Diego couldn't take from him. "I'm sure," Carmen whispered. "I want this. I want you. All of you, while we still can." Miguel entered her slowly, carefully, feeling her tense and then gradually relax as her body adjusted to accommodate him. She was tight and warm and perfect, and the sensation of being inside her was so overwhelming that he had to pause, breathing hard, trying not to lose control too quickly. Carmen's hand slid down his back to grip his hips, urging him deeper, and he obliged, pushing in until he was fully sheathed, both of them gasping at the intensity of the connection. "Okay?" he managed, though forming words felt impossible with every nerve ending firing pleasure signals to his brain. "Yes," Carmen breathed, her eyes locked on his. "Move. Please, Miguel, I need—" He moved, establishing a rhythm that was slow at first, almost tentative, then gradually building as Carmen's hips rose to meet his thrusts. The bed creaked rhythmically beneath them, and they both knew they should be quieter, more careful, but neither could stop. This was too necessary, too vital. This claiming of each other, this act of defiance against Diego's control, this moment of being just two people in love instead of victims of someone else's manipulation. Miguel buried his face in Carmen's neck, breathing in her scent, feeling her pulse against his lips as he moved inside her. Her legs wrapped around his waist, changing the angle, and suddenly she was gasping his name, her nails digging into his back, her body tightening around him in waves that pushed him toward his own release. He tried to hold back, to make it last, but the combination of physical sensation and emotional intensity was too much. "Carmen," he groaned against her skin. I can't. It's okay," she whispered, her hand finding his face, turning him so she could kiss him deeply. "Let go. I've got you." Miguel came with a shudder that seemed to start in his spine and radiate outward, pleasure so intense it bordered on pain. And through it all, Carmen held him, her body still moving under his, drawing out every last wave until he collapsed against her, spent and shaking and more vulnerable than he'd ever been. They lay tangled together in the aftermath, hearts gradually slowing, sweat cooling on their skin. Miguel wanted to say something profound, something that would capture the magnitude of what they'd just shared, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he kissed her shoulder, her neck, her jaw, small gestures of tenderness that said what his voice couldn't. "Tomorrow," Carmen finally said, her fingers tracing patterns on his back, "when you go to that warehouse." "I'll be careful," Miguel promised, even though they both knew careful might not be enough. "And after, when this is over, we leave," Carmen interrupted firmly. "Both of us. We get out of the Bronx, away from Diego, and we start over somewhere he can't find us. We have to, Miguel. After tomorrow, after your friends do whatever they're planning, we have to disappear." Miguel wanted to believe it was possible, wanted to imagine a future where they could be together without Diego's shadow hanging over them. But he knew too much now about how Diego's operation worked, about the reach of his organization, about what happened to people who tried to leave. Still, lying in Carmen's arms with her heartbeat steady against his chest, he let himself pretend. "Okay," he whispered. "After tomorrow, we run." They made love again, slower this time, with the desperation replaced by something gentler but no less intense. Miguel memorized every sound Carmen made. Every place his touch made her shiver, the way she looked when pleasure overtook her. He wanted to carry these memories into whatever came next, wanted to have this night to hold on to when Diego's world closed around him completely. It was nearly 3 a.m. when Miguel finally climbed back out Carmen's window, his body exhausted and his heart simultaneously full and breaking. Carmen stood at the window in her nightgown, backlit by candlelight, looking like something out of a dream or a painting or one of those old movies they showed at the Paradise before it closed. "I love you," she said, and it sounded like goodbye. "I love you too," Miguel answered, and it sounded like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. The climb down the fire escape felt longer than the climb up, each step taking him further from Carmen and closer to tomorrow. The streets were empty now, even Diego's lookouts having retreated to wherever they went in the dead hours before dawn. Miguel walked home slowly, trying to hold on to the feeling of Carmen's skin against his, the sound of her breathing, the way she'd looked at him like he was someone worth saving. His apartment was still dark when he climbed back through his window, his brothers still asleep, his mother still unaware that her son had spent the night becoming a man in ways she'd never want to know about. Miguel lay down on his bed, fully clothed, too tired and too wired to bother changing, and stared at the ceiling while his mind raced through everything that would happen in the next 24 hours. Tomorrow night he would carry heroin to a warehouse in Hunts Point. Tomorrow night his friends would try to photograph Diego's operation, risking their lives to save his. Tomorrow night everything would either fall apart or somehow impossibly come together. But tonight he'd had Carmen, really had her, in a way that was theirs alone, untouched by Diego's manipulation. Tonight he'd felt human instead of owned, loved instead of used, free instead of trapped. It would have to be enough, because tomorrow Miguel knew he might lose everything, his freedom, his friends, his life. But he'd always have tonight, this one perfect night when he'd climbed a fire escape like Romeo and made love to the girl he'd die for, the girl whose brother was going to destroy them both, the girl who'd given him something Diego could never take away, the memory of being chosen, being wanted, being loved for exactly who he was instead of what he could provide. Miguel closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but all he could feel was Carmen's skin under his hands. All he could hear was her voice whispering his name. All he could see was the warehouse in Hunts Point waiting like a mouth ready to swallow him whole. 24 hours. That's all the time he had left before everything changed. 24 hours. And then the bill for Diego's protection would come due in full, paid in heroin and betrayal and whatever pieces of Miguel's soul were left to trade. But for now, in these last quiet hours before dawn, he let himself remember what it felt like to be free, to be loved, to be just a boy who'd climbed through a window to be with the girl who held his heart. It was the last piece Miguel Rodriguez would know for a very long time.
Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures. Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures.